Hi, everybody, and welcome to the live stream tonight. We've been talking about the Alex Murdaugh trial, and one mystery, which is what will the jury do? We now know the answer to that. Alex Murdaugh has been convicted of murder with both respect to his wife, Maggie, and his son, Paul. So we know that. We also know he's been sentenced to life in prison for each of those murders. But there are so many mysteries surrounding the Murdaugh family and mysteries related to things that happened during the case that still aren't answered. The mystery has really only barely been penetrated at this point. And I wanted to talk about 10 mysteries about the family, 10 mysteries that came out at trial, questions that weren't answered, mysteries that have not yet been solved. And please subscribe and join us. We're going to be going live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 Eastern Central Time and more during big trials. We're talking about the biggest, most interesting cases that everybody's talking about, and we'll be covering them every night during trial times. And also, please help get the video out to more people by hitting the like button. So let's get started with the first of 10 mysteries. And I did throw in a couple of bonuses at the end because I couldn't really limit myself to just 10. But here's a question. Why did SLED reopen the Stephen Smith case after Maggie and Paul were murdered? And whatever happened to that? So let's talk about that a little, because I haven't really talked about that on the channel. Stephen Smith was a 19-year-old nursing student who died in July of 2015, and his body was found in the middle of a country road a few miles from Moselle. He was 3 miles from where his car had run out of gas. The gas cap was unscrewed. His wallet was still in the car. It was considered a hit and run. The autopsy showed, or the findings showed severe head trauma with deep gashes on his forehead. Some of the responders thought it was maybe a bullet, but there were no casings or fragments around, so they decided maybe not. And there was no glass. There was no, from a car, there were no pieces of a car, so there was no clear evidence that there had been a wreck or a hit and run. His shoes were still on his feet. One of the troopers said he didn't really think it looked car related. And the coroner told the pathologist he did not agree with the finding that it was a hit and run. So there was a lot of mystery around what happened to Stephen Smith. His mother has fought long and hard for many years to get more information about what happened. For years, rumors swirled that Buster Murdaugh had something to do with the death of Stephen Smith, but with absolutely no actual evidence that I've ever heard about. There were rumors, but I've never heard of any evidence that tied him to that. So, but then all of a sudden, remember this murder was this death of Stephen Smith was in July of 2015. The deaths of Maggie and Paul were in June of 2021. And about 2 weeks after they were murdered, SLED announced, and I'll go ahead and pull that up for you. SLED announced that it was going to go ahead and open an investigation into the death of Stephen Smith. And they actually said, and I'm quoting, based upon information gathered during the course of the double murder investigation of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh. Now, they didn't say what information, and they didn't say why they were reopening it. So far as I know, there was nothing more about that. Now, I'm well aware that there's a lot of rumor and innuendo, and I'm trying to talk about facts and evidence. And thus far, I've seen no evidence of any connection. What then made them decide to reopen that based on the course of the double murder investigations? I remember hearing this at the time and thinking they must have found a vehicle with some damage on it that would correspond to someone being hit. And a hit and run, so someone had left. That was what I thought, but we heard zilch about that at the trial. So if you'd like a whole video on the Stephen Smith issue, please be sure to put that in the comments. But that remains an absolute mystery. And why SLED did what it did, no clue yet. So the second mystery is, why was Alex Murdaugh paying Eddie Smith, cousin Eddie, so much money? Now, Cousin Eddie, Curtis Eddie Smith is his full name, was being paid, according to Alex Murdaugh and according to records that were introduced, $50,000 a week sometimes. Alex Murdaugh said that was due to his opioid addiction. So we interviewed a former opioid addict, Dusty Smith, right here on the channel. Dusty is now in recovery, and what he does is help addicts get off drugs. And here's what Dusty told us. Here, let me remove that first. Oh, never mind on that. Let me add this. Using 66 pills, and that was the high that he mentioned. That would be $1,980 a day. And that's higher than you've seen. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Me personally, that's higher than I've seen. You know, I've seen, like, I mean, it's pushing it to say, like, you know, pills are expensive. You can definitely spend a lot of money. I don't know about $50,000 a week. That seems a bit much in my opinion. But, you know, if he said 5,000 a week, or if he, you know, we could even get up into 10,000 a week, maybe I would feel a little bit more like, okay, that's pretty bad, but, you know, maybe. But 50,000 is a lot. That's a whole lot of money. So I've never seen anything even close to that.
Okay. And I think I just did the math. That would be about, and I think we talked about it before too, that would be about 238 pills a day.
Yeah. So that would mean he's taking a 30 milligram oxy every 7 minutes, or something like that. So that's a lot to be able to function still, because I mean, the human body, you know, you can build up quite a tolerance, but it can't take but so much, and that's a lot.
$50,000 then, according to Dusty, and you can watch that whole video. It was a great interview. I really appreciated Dusty coming on the channel to talk to us about it and to answer so many questions from us. But what he told us was, that's a whole lot of money. That seems like more than one person would spend on an opioid addiction for just that one person. So what was all the money to Eddie Smith about? According to Dusty, 10,000 a week. That's a pretty crazy addict. So 50,000 a week. Wow. You know, how? What else was going on? Was there something more? We may actually get an answer to that, because both Alex Murdaugh and Eddie Smith have been charged with drug trafficking. So we may get an answer in the course of a trial on that. So speaking of Cousin Eddie, and this was my third mystery, whatever happened to Cousin Eddie? Because before trial, we were told by Alex Murdaugh's attorneys that Eddie Smith had failed a polygraph when he was asked if he had been present at the murders of Maggie and Paul or knew anything about them. So what happened to that? I can see where maybe there would be an issue about admitting a polygraph by someone else. I get that. But at least I'm surprised there was zero suggestion of that by either side. He wasn't put on the stand. Nothing happened with Eddie Smith at all. If he failed a polygraph, it seems like we would want to know more and hear more about that, and it just disappeared, if that's in fact what happened. Now, the fourth mystery is the whole side of the road thing. Of all the things, that makes no sense. I still can't really understand, wrap my head around what happened with that whole side of the road. Now, you may remember the story that Alex Murdaugh, the day before, had been confronted by his law firm, asked to leave, told he had to resign. He had been confronted by his friend, Chris Wilson, that morning. He owed Chris Wilson $192,000. The cat was out of the bag. Everybody knew he had stolen money and that he had cheated clients in his law firm. And he decided he wanted to die. And he asked Cousin Eddie to kill him, and staged a setup where it would look like he was changing the tires. So what happened was, it didn't work, according to his story. And when it didn't work, he ended up calling 911, going to the hospital. He had a very minimal wound to the head that was fixed within a few days. And he said that it was just a botched attempt. He started out by telling the police the story that some, quote, good Samaritan had stopped to help him and mysteriously suddenly shot him in the head. He even went so far as to draw a sketch for them of what the person looked like. But then, after he had been at rehab a little bit, came clean and said, okay, no, this was really something where I asked him to do this because I wanted to die. And I was afraid that if I didn't do it this way, if I just killed myself, I was afraid that what would happen is I would end up not being able to get that life insurance policy for my son, Buster, $12 million life insurance policy, and it would have been void. So I decided to do it this way. Well, the problems with that are, first, that Alex says he didn't pay Cousin Eddie anything to do this, to shoot him in the head. Now, why would Cousin Eddie agree to do that when Alex Murdaugh is giving him up to $50,000 a week? Clearly his best customer, millions of dollars. Why would he agree to do that at all, much less for free? The second thing is, if it was really point blank range with a willing victim, how did Eddie Smith manage to miss? Was he really that bad a shot? And then the third question I had about it is, why did Alex Murdaugh think that he had to kill himself anyway? Because Alex Murdaugh's attorney got up and said, well, the policy covered self-inflicted harm if it had been more than 2 years since the time the policy was purchased. Alex is an attorney. Wouldn't he have read that policy? Wouldn't he know that? Now, the fifth question I had, or mystery, if you will, was, what was that Gucci receipt all about? Remember the Gucci receipt? There was a receipt for $1,021.10, a Visa receipt, and just that one line was circled, or that one amount from the Gucci store. It was found in a trash can at the shed along with 2 empty ammunition boxes, and the prosecution witnesses introduced it and talked about it twice. So you just wonder, and now I'll show you and see how it's circled. And they talked about, look, that's circled. And then it just disappeared. It was never mentioned again. You were left to just wonder, well, was this Maggie overspending when the family was having financial troubles? Was this Maggie upset because Alec bought this for someone else? Who knows what it was, but we were left just kind of with this hanging, this Gucci receipt. What was that about? Then there was the issue of Maggie and the wedding rings and the missing wedding rings. Just like I'm going to pull that off as soon as I can figure out how to do that. There we go. Maggie and the missing wedding rings. Remember Blanca Simpson, the longtime friend of Maggie's and of the family and housekeeper, said she found Maggie's wedding ring under the passenger side seat of Maggie's car when she cleaned it out after the murders. Brother John Marvin, and I mean Alex Murdaugh's brother, John Marvin, said he picked up jewelry from the coroner and it included rings, but he didn't really know was it the wedding ring or not. Blanca probably would have more information about that. There was zero testimony about marital trouble. 2 witnesses, including Blanca herself, discussed them having a great marital relationship. She had had a pedicure, and possibly maybe a manicure also. I mean, Maggie had, but why would she take the ring off for that? You don't really have to take your ring off for a manicure. So why not put that into evidence? If it's such a, why was the ring found under there, and why was that not put into evidence by the state? Those remain mysteries to me. Was that something that indicated trouble? And yes, I've heard the interview with the person who did Maggie's nails and said that Maggie had mentioned marital troubles, but I really feel like if the state felt like that was provable, they would have put that in evidence. And what we had was Maggie's sister saying they had a good relationship. We had the family saying they had a good relationship. We had everybody who came, Blanca and even CB Rowe, everybody said they had a great relationship. So there was nothing that broke that or explained why this wedding ring would be under the front seat. Now, the 7th mystery, I thought was, what about those envelopes of cash? Remember those where Nathan Tootin, Paul Murdaugh's friend, who worked as a runner at Alex Murdaugh's firm, said that Murdaugh very frequently asked him to go over to the bank to cash checks at a local bank. And people would be sitting in Alex's office at the time. He mentioned UNSOLVED Police Chief Greg Alexander, attorney Chris Wilson, attorney Corey Fleming. It seemed like at the time that the prosecution was trying to suggest that maybe something underhanded was going on. Was it payoffs or something illicit? But the defense asked Nathan, are you suggesting Alex Murdaugh was giving Greg Alexander money? And Nathan said, I'm not suggesting anything. So, but it did create some issues, because what had to happen then was there was a statement from the UNSOVED police chief saying, I didn't do anything improper and I did get a loan from Alex Murdaugh, but there was nothing strange about that. I just paid it back. So that remains sort of a mystery. What was all that cash about? Was that to pay Eddie Smith? Was there anything going on in the office? Was Alex Murdaugh actually paying Chris Wilson, Corey Fleming, or Greg Alexander? Or was that just something thrown in by the prosecution that really had nothing to do with anything, and none of those people were involved? Still a mystery. Now, number 8, why did SLED get an order to exhume Gloria Satterfield's body? And then, as far as we know, they still haven't done that. And what did they find if they did exhume it? You may remember that Gloria Satterfield, Gloria Satterfield was Alex Murdaugh's very long time housekeeper, much like Blanca, but different, I guess. They must have done different houses or something. But Gloria Satterfield fell down the steps at Moselle. She died 3 weeks later of head injuries, never really recovering or able to speak or explain what had happened. Back in 22, and Alex Murdaugh then at her funeral said to her boys, look, I will make sure we collect from my insurance company and you are taken care of. I don't want you to worry. I'll make sure you're taken care of. Now, Tony Satterfield is an adult, a young man at the time, but he was not a child. But nonetheless, Alex Murdaugh said, I'll make sure you're taken care of. And he sort of did and sort of didn't, because he did collect $4.3 million from insurance companies for that. He got his friend Corey Fleming to represent the Satterfield boys. But then apparently Alex Murdaugh kept it all. He's even confessed judgment in the case, meaning admitted what he did, admitted that he never paid the Satterfields and just kept the money for himself. And so in 2022, SLED said, we're going to exhume the body of Gloria Satterfield. And it was actually from Eric Bland, who represents the Satterfields. He said SLED had asked the family for permission to exhume Gloria Satterfield's body, and the family agreed. But apparently it must not have been exhumed, because recently Eric Bland said the family still wants that to happen. They want to find out what happened to their mother. And so but this was what SLED originally said. They said they planned to exhume the body of the longtime housekeeper and nanny, Gloria Satterfield, and then that never actually happened. Then there are questions, what is it that they think would be shown by that? Do they think that she was pushed down the stairs? How would an autopsy help? We don't really know, but it remains one of those big mysteries around what's happened with the Murdaughs. Now, mystery number 9 to me is, where are the guns and the bloody clothes? The defense witnesses, and in her rebuttal testimony, the witness who performed the autopsies for Maggie and Paul said that the person who shot them would have had blowback on them, and the shooter's clothes would have been bloody. The gun would have been bloody. And of course, there were 2 different guns used to kill Maggie and Paul. The blackout that killed Maggie was definitely not found. And the shotgun that killed Paul was certainly not definitively identified. And it was probably not the gun that Alex Murdaugh had with him, because it wasn't covered with blood. So where are the guns and the bloody clothes? Now, we know that SLED searched the ponds and the swamps around Moselle. We know that they searched them because they said that they brought out a dive team and it was so shallow that they ended up not really being able to dive. They just sort of walked through and looked for everything. But they did not search Alex's parents' house for several months. When they did, of course, they found no trace of either bloody clothes or of anything having to do with the guns. They didn't find the guns. There was also, and they also searched the river near the Murdaugh property as part of the double homicide investigation to try to find out, looking apparently for the guns. They never found any of this. So that remains one of the mysteries. Where are the guns? Where are the bloody clothes? What happened to them? And the 10th mystery I put in was whose hair was in Maggie's hand? And I'll combine these two. Why was there unknown male DNA found under Maggie's nails? It did not match her family. It could match C.B. Rowe, but the witnesses also said it could have matched other people. C.B. Rowe now was the groundskeeper who also was the dog caretaker. So Colleton County Sheriff's Detective Laura Rutland said Maggie had strands of brown hair in her hand. It was shown in the autopsy photos. And then witnesses said she also had, prosecution witnesses said she had 3 alleles that matched C.B. Rowe's DNA under her fingernails. Now, whose hair was that? Yes, I heard Laura Rutland's interview on Court TV, and Laura Rutland said, well, I think it was Maggie's hair that when we rolled her over, she picked it up. The problems with that are twofold. First, Maggie's hair should have been blonde, and everyone testified that this hair was brown. But even more importantly, it wasn't tested. And the question is, why not? Why would SLED not test that? Just to confirm so that it was clear, because it opened up an argument in closing for Griffin. Jim Griffin said, well, what have you heard about that? You heard about this hair and brown hair, and she's got blonde hair, and Alex got the strawberry red hair, and Paul had red hair. So whose hair is this? Because it's not any of their hair. That left an opening and a question. Exactly why was this there? It could have been an easy explanation. Maybe because Maggie had been petting the dogs and taking care of the dogs, and C.B. Rowe had done that too. Maybe there was some easy explanation, but it wasn't ever made. So we still are missing those two. So there are 2 other questions I'm going to just kind of throw in at the end. Questions I had that I thought were never fully answered. One was, why did the killer take Maggie's phone and not Paul's? And now, because the jury has spoken, why would Alec have taken Maggie's phone and not Paul's? There was the suggestion that maybe the camera was almost activated. Could Maggie have been taking a picture? We don't really know. I also never fully understood why Alex Murdaugh's phone was recording steps at the same time Maggie's was transitioning from horizontal to portrait, but not recording steps. I understood the prosecution to say it could be lying on the golf cart, but if so, was Alex Murdaugh walking beside the golf cart, or how is he recording steps at the same time? I always thought that was a little unclear. So I'm going to look back through for questions or anything. I also want to say again on the super chats last time, I'm so sorry about that. But I hope if you did not get my response during the video, that you saw that I wrote it down, and I wrote it down on our community page. So be sure to subscribe, because then you can go onto the community page and see what I write there to everybody. And so thank you. Thank you again. And I'm sorry that I missed those last time. So let me run through here and make sure I haven't missed a question that somebody had. I'm pleased that I was able to run through this pretty quick. And Snowfire is fired up tonight. Snowfire had a lot of questions about the trial, which I appreciate. That's good thinking about and actually applying some critical thinking to the issues. I love that. And that's one of the things I love about this channel and about all of you as subscribers. You ask seriously the best questions. You have the best ideas, and I really, really appreciate it. Don't forget that we are going to be covering the Lori Vallow Daybell trial. It's coming up pretty soon. It starts, I believe, April 4th. The jury selection is the week before that. It's not going to be easy to get information about that case because of the fact that the judge is not allowing video. There's not going to be a camera in the courtroom. So it'll be a little different, a lot more difficult to find it. But boy, is that an interesting case. So somebody suggesting the Stephen Smith case will never be solved. It may not. I mean, it's been quite some time, and I don't know how they're going to prove it unless there were other witnesses who come forward and can say exactly what happened. I think that's what we would almost have to wait for. That side of the road, Alec wanted to set up cousin Eddie for the murders. My goodness. Wow. That's really intense. He failed miserably if he was doing that. Wow. I have not seen that, so I can't answer that. So it looks like I've answered, I think, most of the questions. Oh, wait, there's one from RLU asking me, why does he start with an explanation to 911 or the police at the shooting? I don't think he started with that. He said, get out here, but I'm sure immediately you would be thinking, who on earth would do this? To me, I thought that was helpful. If anything, like, go look for them. I think I would be saying the same thing if I thought I knew who did it. I always thought that was a little harsh on him to say that that was so unusual. So the Netflix documentary suggests Alec took out an insurance policy. There was zero evidence. I don't know. I can't answer that question. I do know that repeatedly there were questions at the trial about, are you aware of any insurance policy on Maggie or Paul? And everyone who answered the question said, nope, don't know anything about an insurance policy. And so as far as I know, they didn't have one. I have no idea what information Netflix has, but it was not put in by the prosecution. And I will say this, if the prosecution had evidence that there was an insurance policy taken out on Maggie a month beforehand, I cannot imagine a trial in which the prosecution would not put that into evidence because it's so important. So it seems to me that they ought to have done that. All right, I'm running quickly through to the end in case there's something I'm missing. Oh, Denise. Hey, Denise. Is asking me, can you do a video on the Alec appeal? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. We will definitely do a video on the Alec appeal. I will also do videos on if we are given access into some of the cases, like anything having to do with Stephen Smith's death, anything that has to do with drug trafficking against Alex Murdaugh and against Eddie Smith. Absolutely. We will look into that. Thank you, Mary Jean McCarthy. She's asking me about whether I can cover a certain case, Sarah Boone case. I really appreciate your suggestions about cases that we can cover. So thank you so much. Be sure to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.